Well, after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, a group of parties across Parliament here in Denmark have agreed on a framework for defense and security spending in the years to come. Danes have been asked to go to a referendum on the Danish defense EU opt-out here in June. And also, as we have heard today and also yesterday, energy policy has moved to the center stage of security policy. And then I haven't even mentioned the Arctic. Well, today with our speakers, I hope this is a chance for you to get a bit more detail about the different positions of the parties, and also an idea about where the Danish defense and security policy will be heading in the next couple of years in this landscape that's now totally changed.
First, I would like to say that maybe you noticed in January the Danish government produced a new foreign policy and security policy strategy, which basically have two main items in its content. That, first of all, a small country like Denmark, we need strong alliances, we need international cooperation, and we have benefits, great benefits out of an international rule-based cooperation. That being in the UN, being in the EU, being in NATO. And that will always be a foundation of the Danish security and foreign policy. In that strategy, we set up 5 areas for diplomacy that we will have to handle in the coming years. First, value diplomacy, where we need all in Denmark to be in the forefront of the fight of democracy, freedom, and committing international structures, and all that belongs to that. Secondly, safety diplomacy, where we have to place Denmark in a new global picture on security, which have just been much more relevant, of course, after the 24th of February. Thirdly, climate diplomacy, where we all know that maybe climate is the biggest problem for all of us on this globe, and therefore Denmark wants to be a first mover, and also have taken steps to be first mover in fighting climate change. Fourthly, migration diplomacy. We all see what both climate but also what unrest in the world, now also unfortunately in Europe, gives us challenges when it comes to our asylum system, which is not functioning very well globally. And fifthly, economic diplomacy. Well, we want also to be in the forefront when it comes to green solutions on a global scale. That was the main content of the strategy, and of course this is still reliable, and these challenges are still there and have to be met by our foreign and security policy. But of course, after the 24th of February, where we saw Putin and Russia go into war in Ukraine, this have, of course, enforced that now we have to use much more power and put emphasis into our alliances in the West and in NATO. We have to make these alliances stronger. That has also luckily been shown during this crisis, that the West have been able to keep together and also made a strong response to Putin. And it's for sure that it's also now quite clear that Europe has to take a stronger response for their own security within the cooperation of NATO. And actually the war we now see in Ukraine has in fact brought this stronger in action than before. And as was mentioned on the background of this, we made a broad national agreement on defense and security for the coming years, where we will now reach the spending of our 2% of the BNP for our defense in the coming years. And now in the coming months we will have to negotiate a new defense budget agreement where this will be carried out in details. But just to mention as the last thing I will say, the main areas where we see Denmark have a big role to play when it comes to defense and security in Europe, of course defined as a part of our NATO role, will be of course in the Arctic area, and within the whole part of the Danish kingdom. That will be our responsibility as a transit country for NATO, especially on securing the Baltic Sea and the Baltic countries. Still, I think it will be needed both for Europe as a whole, with cooperation within the EU, but also for Denmark to have capacities to be active still in, for example, missions in North Africa to combat the terrorism and threats against Europe from there. Fourthly, on cyber, which is the new warfare area, we have to have a lot of stronger competences on this area. And finally, I would also say that we see a situation where it's clear, as I said, that Europe has to take responsibility much more of their own security, and still also maybe have within NATO to help our partner, the US, when it comes to activities going on in the Asia Pacific, where we in Denmark, as a big nation, ship nation, of course have interest in keeping the sail routes free. And with all this on the table, with the new threat, I would say, from Putin and the East, we also, in this national compromise, found it important now to ask the Danish population whether Denmark should still have its EU reservation on defense, because as we see it from the Social Democratic part, we now need to use all tools against the new threats. And the most important tool is, of course, NATO, but EU gives us another tool in securing our defense on East, and that's why we think it's important that we not longer uphold our EU reservation on defense, and all that together will hopefully give us not stronger position when it comes to securing our Danish security, but also globally make the world hopefully a world where we can meet the challenges that we see both on climate and unfortunately now also on conflict.
Well, as you said, Peter, a lot has changed since you asked us to come here. February 24th, there's no doubt that when Vladimir Putin launched an unprovoked invasion of Ukraine, where he set up the largest armed conflict in Europe since World War II, the world has changed. The world has changed a lot. Since Russia's aggressions towards Ukraine has increased, decreasing, however, has been the hope for diplomatic solutions for a long time up till the war. But as the war rages on, it's unclear what will happen next. The only thing we can conclude for sure is that we unfortunately stand in a new and tense security situation that counts for both global and national level. And that is why we need to look towards NATO and say what can we do more. That's why we made the national compromise and saying we want to put up our 2%, which by the way is somewhere around 2.5 billion euros a year. So that's quite a bit of money that we will go out and invest. We will go into these negotiations. I think the beginning of the fall probably will be the time. And we also need to look towards what can we do within Europe together. I think that in the light of the current situation in Ukraine, it's clearer than ever just how important international cooperation is. It's the same thing as you said. For us in the Conservative People's Party, it has not been different since 1992. We always meant that we have to have an EU line and a NATO line, and we always wanted the 2%. So we're glad that we're finally there. We're not glad of the reasons why we're there, but we're glad that we're finally there. And then, what will we look into towards NATO? That is very interesting. There's a meeting in Madrid in the end of June where we will look into and say what will be the future role for Denmark within NATO. There's no doubt that the Arctic area will be important, protection of our own borders, of course, and the ECC, as I see it as well, will probably be some of the things that we will be looking into, maybe protection of the Baltic countries as well. And then we have the EU, where we will vote on June the 1st, and hopefully we will get into being a part of EU as well, of the common defence within EU. Last but not least, it's important for me to say that when the whole world is looking at Ukraine at the moment, people tend to forget to look elsewhere in the world. My personal concern right now is Mali, which is a big issue. The only ones fighting there, as far as I'm concerned, is the Russian Wagner group that takes care of the situation in Mali. They have another level of human rights protection than we do when we're there, and I'm afraid that the refugees who comes out of that, well, they will not be sent over to the east. That's one thing that's for sure. So I think that is a big concern within Europe as well, and there's also a point to consider whether this was planned by Putin in the first round, saying, okay, now they're out of Mali, now we take Ukraine, we have I think 5 million refugees from Ukraine, 7.1 million who are refugees internally in their country, and look what could come out of Mali. This could really set Europe back, so it's very, very important that we in Europe stand together towards this horrible, horrible enemy that Putin is. I think that was for the first round anyway.
Niels and Mogens have already said very clever things about defense, which I agree with most of it. Not all of it, we get back to that. I think I'll just tell you a little bit shortly about my party that's in a terrible state. And you're quite welcome also to ask me questions about that. A couple of years ago, we were a very big party. We're not exactly big anymore, we're very, very small. And we can't really find out how to tackle that, also in situations like this where we have to go into a new defense budget discussions, where we are and our muscles there are not the way they have been earlier. Why it's gone the way it has with our party is, of course, in my opinion, because many of the other parties, also the older parties like Socialdemokratiet or Conservative, very much changed their way of looking at immigration to be more like what we wanted. And of course, it should be a luxury when you're politicians and you see that you are what you dreamed of many years ago is now coming true. And we should cheer every night and shout hurrah. But I got very different to doing that. But in a way, it's a positive sign. I think Denmark has changed their ways very much because of the influence from our party. And I also think that most politicians would agree with that. It is a completely unique system that we have in Denmark. where there's more or less agreements now of how to tackle the immigration, and I think we've done our bit to make that possible. Elections, I said before I start talking about the defense, I just talk about the elections. Niels and I just talked earlier, and both had agreed in a way that a possible election time would be September, October. At most you can go and tell the Prime Minister that.
So you get national elections in Denmark.
Yeah, national elections. I think that would be, she'll probably do it, our Prime Minister, at the party opening, I would imagine. She has done well, but she's also had her problems. So has Mogens, by the way, I won't talk about that now. Because I'm a decent guy.
Speak out, so speak out.
I'm sitting here in the middle.
No, but the fact is that the Prime Minister has done a fantastic job. But also now facing problems that she didn't expect after having had such a success in fighting the pandemic at the time, and did very well, and made sure that we can sit in Denmark now and don't need masks anymore like they do in other countries. In China, they still lock people up, and if they shout out from the terrace they want some food, they probably get shot. I don't know. Don't quote me for this, because it's probably not true. There will be problems, of course, when you've had ups like Socialdemokratiet and Mette Frederiksen had for a long time. There will be downs, and of course we hope that will happen at the election. It's quite unforeseeable how those elections will turn out, because there are so many parties that I couldn't now, without having to check my notes, find out how many parties we have in the parliament at the moment. If they all run, I mean, we've had people leaving our party, even if we had a very bad election last time, and I think there'll be probably more. I guess what's going to happen. It's not a nice situation for us to be in. It's true what has been said, that we have now finally agreed on raising the military budget dramatically, but we did act very slow, I must say. As if we a year ago looked at the situation and looked how Russia was acting, that scared the Swedes. Their own defense minister, he spoke out and said, this doesn't work anymore. If we continue the way we do with our budget, there won't be a Swedish army in 10, 12 years. And so the Swedes agreed in the parliament to do this. The same happened in Norway with a lot of investments. Germany did the same, but we didn't do it until after Russia had invaded the Ukraine. Then we did it, but it's difficult to understand why we couldn't then speed up like the other countries do, like Germany, that can reach their 2%, the famous 2%, in already 2024, while we have to wait till 2032. There's no logic in that. We're just as wealthy as Germany are, just as adventurous, and I don't see why that should be the way it is. Arctic, we could probably get back to that. We also wait with the questions, and I'm very happy to answer any questions about that you want to raise. Let's leave it there. Arctic, we didn't talk much about, but that's of course a very vital part of our kingdom, and I think there's an agreement in all the parties that we have to have a strong investment in the Arctic region. Thank you.
And I was surprised to hear about, on one side, not very enthusiastic hope that there will be a yes on June 1, and you didn't even name the vote on June 1. Why are you so unenthusiastic about this referendum?
Because I know that the least we say, the more they will cover it up at the yes side. They make all the mistakes now. We just have to be quiet and watch them make mistake after mistake, and then we'll beat them as we always do.
What do you say about that?
Well, I think we will have that argument going on now until the 1st of June. And luckily, it's not the mind of Søren who decides what the voters will do. And of course, I hope for a yes, because there's a good reason for a yes. It has been discussed why we have been against upholding the reservation before, and there has also been raised questions on why Sweden and Finland didn't want to join NATO before. There has been a lot of positions before the 24th of February, but now it's time for another decision, another important decision. It seems like that will happen now in Sweden and Finland when it comes to joining NATO, and in Denmark. I hope that the Danes will see that when the threats are as they are from Putin, then we have to need all the structures we have to fight back. And NATO is an important structure, but EU also has a structure for this, where I think we, as the only country not being a part of this, will just leave it to the others to do this instead of taking our part of it. Of course, there are things, and we know that when we are out of the defense cooperation, we cannot participate in common missions if that should be needed in the Balkans, where Putin also is a threat. Also, we know we have been outside lots of missions fighting terrorism in the north of Africa. So there's a lot of good reasons for why we, after 24th of February, have a new position, and we ask the Danes is, what do you want? And the Danes answer that. I'm sure they will. And if you just keep quiet, son, it's good for us.
It's fine.
It's good for us.
Yeah. Thank you.
May I just add?
Sure.
That was Sweden and Finland that Mogens mentions is one of the most exciting things that we have in prospect. And as we understand, this can be something that can happen within a few weeks, which is very unusual. But we have, of course, in the Nordic perspective, dreamed of the day where Sweden and Finland would be part of NATO, and also because we work together with the two countries already quite closely. But I'm really happy about that in the middle of everything that's happening. This is a positive thing.
Let me get a question from the Chinese news agency. Their moves or discussions about NATO membership, could that be seen as a helpful thing or a provocative thing in the situation? That's the question.
I think Putin sees this as a provocative thing. I'm quite sure that he sees that as a provocative thing. We see it as a very, very healthy thing. I think it's important to understand also when you're sitting in China, as the people mentioned here are, America is taking themselves more and more out of the EU area. So to be on the European defense side, we need to protect Europe. I think a Danish spokesperson from running the military organization says that if Europe just take care of Africa, everything's good. And I think we'll be doing that. But of course, Putin sees that as provocative. For NATO, we need more member states, and now Sweden, even Sweden and Finland have seen what damage Putin, not Russia, but what Putin can do. And that is very, very scary. So hopefully he sees it provocatively.
But of course, now it's up to the
them.
Swedes and the Finns to take that decision. But if they take that decision, of course we welcome it, because it will be a stronger position. Also for Denmark having our neighbors inside NATO, also for the Baltic. But of course you can perhaps expect reactions from Russia, both verbally, if this is going to happen. And we don't know whether they will respond on putting more troops up here in Europe. We might expect that kind of response, but it will be a strength for NATO. So if that should happen, we very much welcome it.
Thank you. I think we'll go over here to Stefan.
Yeah, I'm Stefan Trump from the German news agency DPA. Coming back to the 1st of June, it started with a quite simple question. It was basically a yes or no question, Forsvarsforbehold or not. And then the question itself was questioned. And now there's a discussion about, yes, we want to get rid of the Forsvarsforbehold, but now we don't want to have this, what is it in English, like this Overstaatsdecade. I think it's supranationality. I'm wondering from an outsider's perspective if Denmark is about to, is not all in this, and or if they are even picking cherries. Is there any risk for that?
Well, I think that this is also a discussion on a ghost, because it's one of the arguments is that there will be a EU standing army, European standing army, and then you will have a over-national leadership of that army. That is not happening today. If that should happen, you should have a new treaty of the European Union, where you will have all countries to ratify a new treaty, and there will be a vote in Denmark for that, if that should be happening. But I haven't heard anybody talk about overnational army. I've heard even France and Germany talked about an army within the European Union, like the Nato army, which is national-based armies that every time you make a mission, then you put together forces and each country decides where to go. That's how it is in NATO. That's how it is today with missions performed in EU, and that's what they have been talking about doing also in the future by having an army of 5,000 people that can be deployed quickly, but by national decision. So it's a ghost that, and I understand why the no side is clinging themselves to this ghost, because that's a picture to frighten people in this discussion. I think that's bad, because it's not true.
I think that those three countries that we work closest with, Norway, Britain and the USA, and not member of the EU, that's ironic. That is where our security lies, and I think that's what the Danes will finally also realize and then give us that no the 1st of June.
My name is Jakob Grønholdt. I'm a reporter for Reuters in Copenhagen. Again, on Sweden and Finland possibly joining NATO, what will that mean for NATO's involvement in the Arctic? Should there be more NATO in the Arctic? And also maybe more broadly speaking, what are the challenges actually for Denmark in the Arctic, given the worsening geopolitical relations with Russia?
I would say that well, as I see it, of course you have to have more emphasis on the Arctic, and we will have to put more resources into our defense there, and so will other coast states. But I also think that the role of NATO can be played out by the coast states. So what is needed to be done in Arctic will as I see it, that can be done by the Arctic member states in NATO. So I don't think you have to set up a certain structure for that in NATO, and that will only be I think that will only be emphasized by if Finland and Sweden will become members also of NATO.
But it is important to see what capability does Sweden and Finland have. Also, if you look into the Arctic, I think it's very important to see that if if you look at the Arctic area, we have the Russians, we have the Chinese who sails around up there with their ships, who are research ships. But they also learn to know the waters, so we need to be careful there. And I think if we look into Sweden and Finland and say, okay, maybe we could look into, if they join NATO, what can we do together? Because they have capabilities that we don't have. Finland is very big on icebreakers. Sweden has submarines. We are, as it looks right now, as far as I remember, not even able to see what is under the water. But we have just made an agreement last summer about drones and other things. So I think together we can do a lot with Finland and Sweden and the Arctic. There's no doubt about that.
Thanks a lot. With us online, we've got also this afternoon Financial Times. So Richard, if you're with us, you're welcome to ask a question, and we should be able to hear it here in the room. So please go ahead. Thanks.
Okay, hi, it's Richard Milne from the Financial Times. I'm in Oslo. I also wanted to talk about EU defence in Finland and Sweden. If you look particularly at Finland, one of the main reasons probably they're looking at NATO is disappointment with EU defence. They wanted Article 42.7 of the EU Treaty to be more important, to have more life than really any other country seems to want it to have. And as Søren mentioned, there seems to be no general sort of enthusiasm for all things in the EU and Denmark. I just wonder, given that Finland and Sweden appear to be saying, the central defence body is NATO, no enthusiasm for EU. I mean, is there not a danger that this becomes slightly a problematic referendum Denmark to have?
Thanks.
I think if we look into the whole situation around NATO and the EU, I think we must also look into that the United States are concentrating themselves much more toward the east in the future, as to where they have been concentrating a lot in our near area. So to look into that, I also think we need EU. So I don't think that one can live without the other. That's the way I see it anyway.
And one shouldn't forget that already today in the defense treaty of the defense cooperation, you have enshrined there a cooperation between EU and NATO. That's already in there, and already today coordination is going on with the defense activities in the EU and NATO, and of course it should be so also in the future. But there's no doubt, as we see it, Social Democrat Party sees it, NATO will still be the main tool for our defense and security, and EU is an addition to that, and maybe the EU defense cooperation will become stronger because it has to, because there will be an understanding within NATO that it should be so, and then that will happen. But that's up to NATO to decide together. And if we are outside the EU cooperation on defense, we cannot be a part of that discussion. Then we have nothing to say as the sole country in the EU.
Well, I think it's only fair to say that of course Europe should take more responsibility when it comes to its own defense. That's one thing. That does not necessarily mean that we have to be part of that system. But the fact that the USA has still got, 25,000 troops in West Germany, or Germany as we call it today, and in Italy they got the same amount. There's no reason why the Germans can't handle it themselves, and so that the Americans can pull out. I think that annoys the Americans, that they still have to be there. Every time they try to or suggest that they should leave Germany, there's an uproar because there's lots of towns and villages that really prosper for the fact that they're making all the deliveries to the bases. Let me just say about the Baltic, the 3 Baltic states will be very happy if Finland and Sweden join. They'll give them an extra security because they are also in mines far away from us in the Baltic Sea. So it'll be. We have all 3 been out there to the Baltics and seen how worried they were a long time ago about what's going on because, of course, they knew the Russians from before.
Okay, this is Thomas Borchert from Frankfurter Rundschau, German daily paper, and it's a question for Mogens Jensen from the governing party. If we agree that migration policy is part of security policy, then how do you explain the logic of saying to Danish people we should finish the opt-out when it comes to defense policy, but we absolutely stick to the opt-out when it comes to asylum policy? Because the whole of your asylum policy is based on the opt-out. It couldn't be what it is without the opt-out. Is that logical?
Well, it's as you know, the history about the opt-outs are that this was a decision taken by the Danish people, and that has been respected from our side. And when things change, as they certainly have done after the 24th of February when it comes to defense, then it's logic to take a new decision on that because the security situation is quite it's so different as it is. And as I said before, this has now meant that other countries have taken very big historic decisions, like we see what will happen in Finland and Sweden, but also Germany has taken a historic decision on changing. So I think it's logic due to the new security situation in Europe when it comes to this, and when it comes to other opt-outs, we have had a vote on the juridical acts where the Danes didn't want us to leave that opt-out. So I can just say that if other questions in the future will come to our migration policies, then this vote will be taken at that time, but that's not now.
Thank you. And we have another question here, please.
Yeah, I'm M.Harwani from Indiavision and NRI Achievers in India. Gentlemen, my question is, I've been watching your press conference today. Everybody's talking of war, nobody's talking of peace. What happened to United Nations? Can Modi play a role in it? So you talk of peace, not for war. And what is the end of it? You bring Finland, Sweden in Nato. So we are going to fight more people are going to die. But this is not the solution. We have to think of solution, not thinking of war. And my second question is, can India play a role in trying to mediate between Ukraine and Russia? Mr. Modi is coming next week, next fortnight to Denmark. Do you think Mr. Modi can play a little role in it?
Well, if I should start, thank you for the question. And well, I hope that India will play a role in order to make this war stop, or play its role in order to make this war stop. As a big democracy, the biggest democracy in the world, and I also think now with stronger and stronger relations with, among others, the EU, Europe, and also Denmark. I hope that will happen, and I think we all hope for peace. We never wanted this situation, and why do we have this situation? Yeah, I have to say it's because of one person who was belief in a special historic version on how Russia and Europe have developed has brought us into this tragedy. And of course, we could also hope that UN had the power to go more offensive into this conflict. But what we have always also seen that, unfortunately, is that the structure of the UN as it is today, with the Security Council and the vetoes, that has not been possible. So unfortunately, and that's what I also spoke about, I think we see a global development where the international rule-based structures are getting weaker and weaker, and that's bad. I agree with that. And we have to fight for repowering these institutions, but that's not where it's going right now.
Gentlemen, my other question is, by providing arms to Ukraine, you are trying to increase the more fight, more war, more people are going to die. So do you think it's logic for Denmark, or America, or Germany trying to sell arms? They're absolute arms which cannot be used after 40 years. They're 40, 50 years old arms. You're trying to sell to Ukraine, making money out of it. Don't you think it is really created by America just to make money out of it? And America is using Europe and Ukraine just to make fool of everybody.
I think it's important to say that Ukraine and the people of Ukraine is fighting heroically for their country and their own security, and it's a tragedy what's going on, also all the deaths, but they have the right to self-defense, and as a part of that, other countries can help them.
No, what's the ultimate?
Other countries can help them.
Okay, but my question is, what is ultimate end to it? What do you think after 10 years, or after next? What do you think next week? What's going to happen?
Next week?
Yeah, next week, next month. And if you have any prediction, what's going to happen?
Well, I hope, of course, that it will be possible for Ukraine to stop the aggression of Putin. But we also know that we don't know how long this conflict or this war will take. But I, of course, hope that Ukraine will have the power to stop. And also, what I think have been as a very strong part of this war is that the Western countries, the EU, others, have imposed the most severe economical sanctions on Russia that ever have been cast on any country. And also you can see the results of that. And I hope that will help also, of course, to end the war. But I cannot foresee how, of course, that will happen and when.
Thank you.
I think that very shortly, I think that one of the ways that we can make peace is that Russia runs out of money, and I think that's where the whole world has cases to look into. I myself are very concerned in saying, okay, what is going to happen? European companies closes down in Russia, which from people point of view and for a short-term point of view is very good. But let's just look into that. If you have a company who has businesses in Russia, who close down, who has the whole value chain, it will be like that if you fire one person in Russia, you have to fire 2 persons elsewhere in the productions. So if that production takes place in China, which most of it does, then the Chinese people will make copying brands of these stores or whatever it is, products, and then the Chinese will come and say, okay, now we will open up in Russia. I think that we have seen the first copy of a McDonald's there. I think we have seen a copy of other cases. So if you look on a broader perspective, if we can just stop or ask China not to start investing in Russia, we will be far. But I think that's where India can help by being the world's biggest democracy, helping the world understand the problems we will be in if Russia becomes a de facto Chinese state.
Thanks. Søren, comment?
Well, I think that we should have provided Ukraine with weapons long ago. When it first started in the Crimea, I think it was 2014, then we should have given the weapons. They get it now, but it's in a way too late. And I think if we stopped providing weapons to the Ukraine, it would only be Ukrainians that die, and not Russians. I think it's important to say that they're also fighting our war in Ukraine at the moment. And I do believe the old saying that if you want peace, you should prepare yourself for war.
We as conservatives always believe in protecting our own borders. We do that very well with the sea, and we do that very well on plane. When that is said, it must be up to a military evaluation on what we need. I'm not going to sit here and say that we're going to buy 6 submarines and 13 more F-35 planes, because it must be up to the armed forces to say what they need. They can't have politicians sitting here and saying that. When that is said and done, we believe in protecting our borders, and that is done well by plane and by sea. But the biggest problem in Denmark at the moment within the military right now is also the lack of people, as Søren just said. A constable in the Danish army has a lifetime there for 2.3 years in Rushnic, and that is not a long time to get good experience. So we need to look into that. How do we keep people for a long time in the army?
Yeah, you've seen already, of course, when it was announced that we now raise the budget, that a lot of people then looked into the equipment catalog and said, now we will have this. I think it is very important that we spend this money very wisely, and we have set up a procedure. We have asked a council group analyzing the security situation now on a longer term for Denmark. This group is working until summer. We'll come out with a report setting up where do they see on a big scale the challenges for Denmark when it comes to defense. That analysis will have to be taken down and discussed, and the army, of course, will have to look into this and come up with proposals for how do they see meeting these challenges, that we need equipment there and there. Of course, in all this has also to be balanced within NATO. What kind of equipment, what kind of army do they have in the other countries, so that we don't buy things that all others have. So also this balance has to be there. And when it comes to submarines, a lot of neighboring countries have got submarines, and I just on that note want to say that submarines are very, very expensive. We won't get much submarine for the whole raise of the budget that we have, but that of course is to be discussed. But we have to be in balance with what's needed in the total of NATO.
Do you think we get a good discount from our German friends, or is it better from the Swedish friends? We will see.
Thanks a lot. We've just got 2 more questions from our online media, so if we just can try to answer some, then try to get it in. But there's one here from, we've got with us Finnish Broadcasting Television, and Kirsi is asking if Finland decides to apply for NATO membership, should NATO offer Finland security during the process?
Yeah, that is, I believe, already in the plan. Otherwise, it wouldn't make any sense. It would be too dangerous. So I think that's already been planned. I know.
Of course, we should.
Yeah, agree.
And then again, the Chinese news agency is asking, with all the weapons that the West is sending into Ukraine at the moment, is there any risk that some of these weapons might end up coming back, what he describes as on the European black market? Any chance?